Hey guys, as promised, I wanted to come to you today and give you an idea of what I'm doing with our milling situation. We've got our milling station right here, which I have been gradually bringing down certain trees and turning them into lumber and posts and beams and things like that. So far, the mill has more than twice paid for itself, which is great. But there's actually a method to my madness in regards to the trees that I'm bringing down. Some of them are in the way, so they get moved, but other ones I'm bringing down specifically because our timber management plan calls for removal of certain types of trees. For those who haven't followed along, our property was fully in timber status when we purchased it. So all 45 acres were in timber status, which is great from a tax perspective. You get all sorts of discounts and things like that. The drawback to it is I'm not particularly fond of having any type of agency looking over my shoulder. But be that as it may, we're saving a lot of money by going that way. But when the forester came out and was talking to me about the various trees and what he was seeing on the property and stuff like that and what would need to be done over the long term, he was pointing out certain parasite type things, and those would be the trees that we would want to take out first, regardless of whether we liked where they were at or what they look like. They have parasites or disease on them. And the one that is the biggest one for us out here in the Colville area, at least on our property, is what's known as the dwarf mistletoe. Very similar to like the Christmas mistletoe and stuff, just a smaller variety. This particular parasite plant, the seed ends up on a branch, whether it be carried there in the poop of a bird or through its natural spread, which the dwarf mistletoe has an interesting breeding cycle. But anyways, and then the seed lays down roots into the bark, and then the plant itself actually lives within the moisture carrying layer directly underneath the bark. So it's that sub bark layer, and I don't remember what it's called, but it lives in there, and you don't even see it until you start seeing the effects of it, or during its blooming cycle, which for the dwarf mistletoe here in Colville is in the September timeframe. And then it comes out as this little itty bitty little plant that grows out of the bark, and it looks kind of like a little fungal thing that, oh look, there's a fungus growing on it, but it's not that big of a deal. Well, it is a big deal because the way it feeds off the tree doesn't necessarily cause damage to the tree directly, but the tree responds to the parasite and starts growing in weird patterns, and then eventually as the parasite spreads throughout the tree, as it drops, spreads, throws, whatever, birds carry more onto it. If the tree becomes overwhelmed, then it dies off and becomes a hazard. The forester showed me a couple of different ways to recognize the parasite, even if it's not in bloom status, and that's kind of what I want to show you today. Some of the trees that are out here are the healthy ones, and then there's other ones that are the not so healthy ones, and I'll show you the difference between those, and those are kind of the ones that I'm trying to pull from, assuming that they're of sufficient size for the lumber that I need to mill. But so the dwarf mistletoe, one of the signs that you can see is that the branches start growing in a weird pattern. You get a swelling in the bark, so it looks kind of like there's this lump, kind of like a snake swallowed something or something like that. But so you get this lump in the bark, and then the branches start growing in weird patterns. This tree over here behind me is a larch, and that larch is starting to lose its needles. It's one of those interesting evergreen trees that loses its needles for the winter. But if you notice, it's actually got a nice uniform cone shape branches going all the way up from trunk all the way up to the top, and that's a healthy one in its quote unquote leaf dropping phase. And then this one up behind me, if you look at it, you can see that there's all sorts of kind of lumps and clumps of branches that are growing, and that shows that that particular tree has a standing mistletoe infection, and that one is actually pretty consistent from top to bottom, so it's pretty severely infected, and that's one of the ones I'm going to take down today. It's not thick enough to be lumber status, but I just want it down. It can be a little difficult at times with the larches because they don't grow the same way as the firs do. Like this one here, if you look up at it, it's still fairly uniform, but it's got those little clumps. So this one here is less infected, but is still in need of pruning. And if it was just the lowest branches, I might actually be able to trim off, prune those lowest branches and then potentially save the tree if I wanted to save it. In this case, it's kind of in the way for what we want to do. And then, so I'm just going to take it down just to remove it. The firs are a little bit easier. So a nice healthy fir tree, off in the distance, you can kind of see this tree right here at the top of my finger, up and down. Nice uniform cone-shaped structure going from top to bottom and things like that. And but off here, here's another fir tree, and you can see that massive cluster of branches at the base of the tree. That tree is going to have to come down, and soon. And the reason it's important to get these down is because not only is the seeds carried by birds in their bird poop, but the seed pod, as it matures in September, and it's only active for like 2 weeks, but as it matures in September, the forester was saying that it's actually under hydrostatic pressure. And so when it's mature, it actually explodes and flings the seed sideways with speeds upwards of 50 or 60 miles an hour. So it can travel 50, 60, 70 feet sideways to the next tree over. Then it has to land on a branch, stay on the branch, and put its roots down. So we don't want that to happen. It's not a fast process. It's not like these trees are in danger of completely wiping out our entire property in the next year or two. But he's like, yeah, you want to drop those things, and just dropping them on the ground is enough to keep the spread from going, because it takes quite a bit of moisture for the mistletoe to survive in there. So I've got a couple trees I need to drop today, and I've been actually looking for ones that were big enough to be lumber, because I'm right at that tail end where we're getting ready to build the pole barn around the RV to cover for winter, and I need some big trees. So why not hit two birds with one stone? Take down a disease tree and get me my lumber. Which brings me to this tree right here, which I'm not going to step back far enough for you to see it, the whole tree, but it's fairly uniform at the top, and then so it's pretty uniform way up there, but you can see the two little clusters. There's a cluster right here, and then there's a cluster there, and then a little further up there's another cluster of branches. So this has an infection on the lower levels, and theoretically I could probably go up there and prune those branches and save this tree. And it's a fairly decent sized tree. I'm going to guess that this tree is probably about, I don't know, probably about 80 years old. But the other thing involved with this one is, I'll move a little closer so you can get a better look at it, whether it be damage or due to disease or something like that. There was a split down below, and so there is actually a disease vector right there, because you can see all that sap coming out of that crack in the tree. So this tree is big enough. I think it will actually give me the lumber that I need to finally get going on the pole barn, and just in the one tree. So I'm going to drop that tree later today, and even though I could probably prune it and save the tree, again, it's not necessarily in a position where I feel like it needs to stay, and I do need the lumber. So it's kind of, let's go ahead and drop that tree, give me a little bit of lumber that I need, and that way I don't have to drop a healthy tree somewhere else that may be a little bit more convenient. But so hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the things that go into a management plan, a timber management plan, and why I'm dropping trees, and some of the thought process that goes behind it, and then how that's turning into the lumber for our structure. And so we're just plugging along, getting ready to do some more milling. Tara was out yesterday and actually sealed the end of the boards, and maybe I'll do another video at some point and show you kind of what the process is in regards to milling, and what I'm thinking about when I'm choosing logs and or deciding which one to go with, and some of the concerns in regards to that. But so hopefully this little informational video is you enjoyed it, and it gives you an idea of some of the stuff that goes on with it, and some of those creative branches and clusters of trees and stuff like out there. You may start to recognize that, oh, it may be interesting looking, but that's actually a disease. So, and that stuff needs to be taken down in order to have proper management. But, so hopefully you enjoyed. Have a good day.